All right, folks, this is Fabrice. On the call, I have Positive4ce with me. You probably know him if you know me, but if you aren't aware, I think he's probably the single most prolific content creator right now in Ravenswatch. Put out guides and gameplay videos, and he's streaming now on YouTube. Ace, you're thinking about going to Twitch sometime soon, right?
Hey, well, thank you for having me here. Thank you for that intro. I actually am thinking of setting up the Twitch. I got it set up and I streamed on Twitch, but I saw that my screen was black, and so I'll get that figured out.
Well, that'll be awesome. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people excited to see you on there when you feel like you're ready and the tech all works out.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to look at a couple different things with these characters. We want to talk about main builds. We want to talk about their starting talents, their ultimates, and some other talents that stand out to us. Some of these characters we're probably going to take longer for because there are more things to talk about. Some of them will go a little bit quicker, but we want to get started at first here with Carmilla. So Carmilla is the newest character in the roster. She's introduced with version 1.0. She has a really unique kit, very bleed heavy. I don't know, Ace, you've been playing a lot of Carmilla. I think you've done a lot of interesting and different things with her. How are you feeling at the moment?
Carmilla is, in my mind, a tougher character to play to start out with because she's one of the few that requires a lot of resource management, where most characters don't have a resource to manage as much. We only have a few of those. And her attack gets you, what is it? It's like 8 blood total in the whole combo, which isn't that much. So you're really dependent on your special and special cooldown. I think, in my mind, that's like the only part of her kit that I don't really like is how dependent some builds can become on her special. But I do really like how position oriented her gameplay is because you have this power that is probably like the best level 1 ability in the game. If you get it set up right, you can clear an entire camp at level 1 with 1 use of your power. And I think that's really, really cool. It rewards understanding enemy attack patterns, it rewards positioning. And having that just in the game, I think is really, really cool. I think she has also some of the most diverse builds. I like it when a character has 4 different builds. There's a lot of characters that I think have less than that, but she, in my mind, has very specific 4 different builds. For the most part, her starting talents all complement a different style of build. Anything to say on her starting talents? Because I can go in on something after.
Yeah, I think Batmaster is probably my favorite personally. The mobility you get, having stealth, moving really smoothly between camps. I think that the start that you get with Batmaster is really, really strong. Also, her defense is just has a lot of great utility in general. I think that one of the hard things with Carmilla, honestly, is that she has so many good things in her kit, but you kind of need to figure out which ones to pick up. You have so many good defensive talents that it feels bad to pass them up. But if you're going into a power build, you kind of have to be a little ruthless about what you prioritize. But yeah, I feel in terms of her starting talents, Batmaster is probably one that is most simple to use and just gives you a really good start. I like her other talents as well. I don't know. What else would you pull out on that?
So I think Batmaster is, if there was one default talent that you can take in every build, I think it's Batmaster. I think that stealth capability lets you set up, you get to see dream shards, and they don't have like that defensed aura around them. So you get to set up in a position every single time you see dream shards to take them out. You get to stealth healing fountains. Sometimes you can go into camps and just land on the chest or the vision tower and stealth that. Again, you get to fly around at high movement speeds, and co-op, you can go pick up a bunch of teleports. So I think that's like the default starting talent. Her other ones, like Life Essence is cool. Blood Rage, I said in my guide, and this is wrong. I wish it combined with Injection. It doesn't because you need to channel Blood Rage for 1 second. So Blood Rage doesn't really have any synergy in the kit except for with Wild Heart, where the explosion gains range. I wish there was more synergy with it. I mean, I guess it has the flesh rip synergy as well. Lastly, we have life tap, and this one is probably like the weirdest one to make work because you sacrifice 20% of your health to recover blood. It is cool because you can stay in your trait form for a very long time if you play this right, but you can also just do that with a bunch of special cooldowns or special charges, and it lets you reactivate trait. And there's 2 talents that she has. Gust, which you activate trait, and it does this AoE that does a lot of stagger, which she does not have a lot of stagger in her kit, and that's probably her biggest downfall. That does a lot of stagger, so I was really hopeful, like, oh, here's an ability that they want you to take that you can reproc with that to stagger enemies. No, that doesn't work. And then Angel and Demon, I actually understand Angel and Demon not working because in the daytime you restore health, and that would just counter all the negatives from life tap. I wish those worked together.
It is cool though because it leans more into Carmilla using her like health pool as part of her resource. In general, it's interesting because Carmilla yo-yos her health bar a lot more than most of the rest of the roster. She has a lot of value around playing with her health pool and allowing herself to take damage. Like a lot of the time, you'll be holding your power in a fight, knowing that you're about to level up, or that you're going to get heal from the trait because it's daytime. So I feel like Carmilla does a lot more of that kind of stuff where that she is deliberately allowing herself to take damage, knowing that it's not going to be a problem for her.
No, I agree with that. I think a lot of people have told me that they like the boiling blood ability, where after consuming health for 1 second, you get to feel an ability and gain regeneration. I know we had talked about Unicorn Horn and the other one. There's like, I guess, one source of regeneration that you can get, but I feel like I've done this build with 5 mermaid tears, and the amount of health that you consume before you start regenerating, and then the speed at which you regenerate health versus how much health you lose, it's tough because I feel like you actually need more than 5 mermaid tears. If you have a bunch of unicorn horns, then it does work, but you're committing so much of your build to this that I wish that talent worked after like 0.5 seconds, not after 1 whole second. Because again, I like what you're saying. She yo-yos her health a lot more. Because I find myself so many times just being like, it's worth it to consume all my health right now. So I like that idea in her gameplay. Like, hey, you can sacrifice all your health for this big source of damage, but like you better know what you're doing to like actually achieve that.
I kind of feel like if you tweaked some things in the item pool, then maybe the base kit here works better too. Like some of the things that we called out in our other discussion might have some implications for how well and how smoothly she can build. Another problem is just controlling the RNG. If you want to play around boiling blood, you need some other things to bring it together cohesively. So I don't know. I'd be curious to see how that would work if, say, Unicorn Horn had a different threshold. One of the interesting things about Carmilla is that she has a couple of these multiplicative talents like Onslaught that look really strong. Like you compare Onslaught numbers just at a glance to Double Strike and you're like, wow, this seems really, really good. The issue is that Carmilla's base attack is so low that attack is a really hard thing to scale into. Also,
Mhm.
Onslaught's a little bit awkward because it's a forced movement right after your special, and I think mechanically it can get you into trouble. Like there's sometimes
Mhm.
Onslaught just throws you into the middle of a pile of enemies. But besides that, because Carmilla's attack damage is relatively low, in her base kit, her last attack does 300% damage, and that sounds like a lot, but when you actually see it, it's like a normal attack for another character.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, I think like my second video I did on Carmilla, I tried to invest in attack. I tried to take Onslaught, Cruel Strikes, and at first I was a little impressed with it, mainly because of Cruel Strikes. And I saw Onslaught and that 800% number and was thinking, oh, this is going to go insane. That like, how do they add this into the game? It's not that great. She's one of the few characters though that I feel like has, again, a wide variety of builds. She has this power build, and it's cool because you can use the injection talent to have power on your special. I really, really like when they do something like that in the game, because now you have two ways to build and invest in your power, or like taking power damage now scales two of your abilities. She has the life essence, which is more of a special focus build. You want to be getting these kills with your special, and they really set her up to do that with her talents like go for the throat and sadism, just to hit really, really hard with your critical hits. Again, blood rage, we already talked about that for power. And then just Batmaster with some pretty cool defensive talents like aggressive flock and dispersion. She doesn't have an attack build, but her attack build is basically get blood whip, the second ultimate, and cruel strikes, and it feels like an attack build because you're using your attack, but no, it's an ultimate build. Sadly, you can't scale damage off your ultimate with any other source but your flat damage. But the cool thing with cruel strikes is you can take eternal rose and proc that very, very often with dash charges, and she probably has the best ultimate build in the game with Blood Whip and Mass Punishment.
Yeah, I'm actually working on some stuff. I don't know exactly what it'll turn into. I don't know if it's going to be a full video or it's going to be like part of a video, but I want to do some analysis of mass punishment because the numbers we see from that sometimes are really, really impressive. And it's really cool because we don't have another character in the game who has this. Like I said, it's nice because she has multiple charges on her attack for her ultimate. Again, unique, it's different, and the synergy there with cruel strikes, because isn't that how it works? Like the cruel strikes is going to grab that last attack and make it the default for the ultimate, right?
Cruel Strikes, yeah, will make it after a dash or defense that you get that final hit, and Mass Punishment only triggers on your final hits. You can guarantee that basically every single Blood Whip attack is mass punishment being the hardest hitting attack that you have.
And that's so cool. And I also like you were saying earlier, the nice thing about injection is that it ties together the special and the power, which makes a hybrid build. That's one of the things I loved about old Scarlet. Not to go there yet, because we're going to talk about Scarlet later, but it's fun when you can take talents that are impact different abilities, but it still synergizes, right? Like those two talents are now tied together, they dovetail. That's a really cool thing in the game. Also nice now that injection actually works on Baba Yaga, because that was not that kind of killed that concept. So really happy that they patched that.
Mm. And then one of the other things that I really like with Carmilla is not all characters get this, but you have cruel strikes with your blood lash. So you have a way to actually do something with your ultimate in the kit, and vice versa. You have her other one, Impalement, which I think she has two amazing ultimates. Impalement does a lot of damage. You have Blood Reserve, which increases your maximum blood, and Impalement does more damage based off how many blood points you consume. So I like that there's a way to scale each ultimate. I find it really funny though that the impalement, there's two impalement upgrades at level 10. There's Torture the Pale, which is in my mind really good. It's like backwash for Melusine, but with an ultimate. And then she has Heartbreak, which is like the same thing as Mass Punishment, so you'd want to take it with Cruel Strikes, but it's 40% of ultimate's damage, where Mass Punishment is like 240% damage. And I'm like, how are these built equally? And one of them is a huge AoE, one of them is like a little poke in front of you. I'm like, I get that you get Heartbreak on every single attack and you don't have to have your ultimate up for this to work, and now it's just your base attack does some ultimate damage, but I don't know, I'm like, those are not built equally at all.
Yeah, I remember I took Heartbreak, and the first time you trigger it, you're like, "Oh, this is a pretty cool effect." This is. I got excited, and then I think I like picked up an Ace of Spades or something, and I realized that my damage didn't change, and it was like, "Oh, wait a second, this is ultimate damage."
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
scaling this is whatever you get flat with this when you get level 10 is all you're getting. So I agree. I think it's kind of sad like how ultimates feel damage wise a lot of the time. It's interesting because though if you fix that problem for a lot of talents and like for if you add some ways to scale ultimate damage in the game, we're going to have some insane things with Mass Punishment. So I'll be curious to see where that goes. It's a really interesting one for sure. Like you do have to build into it to actually have a
Mhm.
character with an ultimate build in its kit. Really nice development for the.
Yeah, yeah, and Cruel Strike's Blood Lash will work up until level 10. I think where it's has some balance is that you don't get this right at level 5. It is your level 10 that you do have to wait for. So you are going to invest a lot into waiting for Mass Punishment, because the attack build on its own with Cruel Strikes and just trying to play off that is not that good. So
I've been trying to get some decent footage of that recently, and I can attest that that's just not. It doesn't feel really great. It's also tough because, like every attack build, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, enemies have bigger and bigger AoEs, and an attack build you have to get close. And Carmilla doesn't have. She's got some decent escapes, but like she's vulnerable on the way in with her special. It's punishing to get this build to its maximum strength. Like you can kind of pivot into it later with a Sands of Oblivion or something.
mhm.
But we haven't talked a ton about her defense build. Like if you get that really online and you get cooldown, you're basically invincible, right?
I think it's probably, if you have Batmaster Dispersion, you could add Aggressive Block if you want. But if you have multiple charges of that and cooldown, and you can almost always have it on cooldown, I think that is probably the easiest way to play the game, because Dispersion is such a wide area of effect and it does a lot of damage just on its own. Like with no damage added to it, it does a lot, add damage, and now you're doing a lot. And yeah, you're invincible pretty much all the time. You just have like those big intangibility slams that will hit you that you have to avoid. And other than that, yeah, you're good. You can never be touched in the entire game.
It's really, really strong. It's cool. It's not like you can instantly get there. You definitely have to build toward it. But Carmilla's defense and the way that Carmilla utilizes bleed is, it really doesn't exist anywhere else in the game. There's evisceration on Scarlet, which is just not very compelling. I was doing some math on it yesterday. But with Carmilla, it's so interesting. It has some of the most unique math behind how it works and how it's applied. And I still don't understand a lot of the pieces, but I was seeing like you had a run like 700 damage bleeds or something.
Hmm.
That's it's a really interesting direction for a character to spec, because we don't actually have a lot of dot effects for characters. It's cool to bring one into the game with Carmilla.
Yeah, I sadly don't have the footage because it was a failed challenge run, but the chapter 2 boss, I hit with I think like 6 dispersions instantly, and the entire health bar was filled with bleed. Maybe like 1/8 of it had already disappeared, but the entire health bar was filled with bleed damage, and I just sat back as it ticked, and I'm like, this is insane.
We'll have to see as we figure the character out more. We'll have to see how far we can take this. But as I understand it, the way bleed works is each bleed application has its own duration. And then the tick, although it's assessed in the same number, I don't think it's in separate numbers, although I could be wrong with Carmilla. They can stack, and so you can have multiple instances going together, and they don't clear each other. That's a kind of the thing that holds back dot effects in other games, like in Hades. Dionysus build, there's a similar damage over time effect. But if you apply a damage over time with a different ability, it'll actually clear the first ability, which messes up with stacking. It seems like Carmilla, everything is just thrown in together. And if you apply it during a vulnerable window, when shield comes back online, the dot continues to tick at the rate that was set when the shield was down. It can be a really strong and really interesting way to get around damage resistance, at least in my tests so far.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm actually really excited to hear that for like chapter 2 crab boss or something.
Testing this with Carmilla is weird because she has so many different sources. So I was testing that with Evisceration. Seems to be how it works. It seems like when you apply the bleed and then their shield comes back online, that the bleed continues to tick at the rate that was set while the shield was down. I need to get into Carmilla and test that more extensively. But that's the other thing that's fun about Carmilla is that we have like 5 different builds here that are all interesting and all unique, and we haven't finished figuring her out yet. It's funny though, because the way that her attack sounds means that most people immediately gravitate towards it, and then they have a really rough time. And I think that that's really hurt her reputation in the Discord, honestly, that people are still trying to make attack builds work, and they're not very good.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I think she very much rewards understanding her resource management and positioning and being able to stand back as all these enemies walk into your power and you just take care of them all. One thing that everyone wish worked was seductive provocation, and it might work. You know, it might work entirely as intended. I haven't looked into like the Discord to see if they've said anything on this, but you stand still for 2 seconds. Is it 2 seconds? I believe it's 2 seconds, and then you apply weaken and vulnerable to an enemy. Your power, you are not moving, but that does not count as standing still. I cannot trigger it. If it did trigger it and you can have vulnerable and weaken on enemies, there's 2 benefits to that. First, vulnerable, you're just going to do more damage. But weaken, a lot of times you have incentive to keep your power charged or like keep it going as you take a hit. If you're going to kill this entire group of enemies, you know, it might be worth it. So adding that weaken effect could be very beneficial. Also, the idea of the flaming pearls effect, being able to have bleed, weaken, and vulnerable and get that 45% more damage on your power just sounds incredible. But I don't think I'll ever take this talent unless it does work with power.
Yeah, it always feels bad when there's something in the game that revolves around literally doing nothing. So I think that part of the design is already weird enough. I also think it's kind of like, I understand why it doesn't work on bosses, but at the same time, boss fights are really the hardest part of the game, the most important part to get right. And so I feel like having a talent that explicitly isn't going to do anything in those situations is a little bit easier, because now that you have Sands of Oblivion, you can rotate out of some suboptimal talents if they help you farm and clear earlier in the game. But at the same time, the philosophy here seems a little bit questionable to me.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree as well. And I don't, I've played into it in a build where I try to stand still and say, okay, let's get everything vulnerable and weaken, and then try to reposition yourself for the power. It just does not, it's not enticing. It's not good gameplay in my mind.
I think that's pretty well where we sit with Carmilla right now. I really like her. She's, I think, one of my favorites to play at the moment. I get some of the endorphins I associate with Scarlet when I play her. She definitely has some things that actually feel very similar to Scarlet. Death's Kiss is very much a bite. It's like the power and the special switched off of Scarlet, but it has its own unique flavor. For example, you can miss with it, which is a lot of fun. I really enjoyed her, and I think that she's been a really good addition to the roster.
No, I agree. I agree.